back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey, man, this time I'm going to do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Freehold, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, normally powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, but today only by wherever you may listen to your podcasts, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, pretty much everywhere you can find a podcast. You can find Keeping It Sports with M3. Another rare Tuesday in which I'm doing the podcast, as yesterday was Memorial Day, and I hope all of you had a very safe, fun, happy Memorial Day weekend, as well as took some time out to very much cherish and be appreciative of the freedoms that we have, thanks to those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And that's really what Memorial Day is about. Saying a prayer for them, remembering anybody that was lost in the line of battle, as well as, we forget they left family members behind, and all of those people did not get to say goodbye to their loved ones. So they remain definitely in our thoughts and prayers, and we say one big, giant thank you to them on Memorial Day. Now, of course, we got a lot of sports to talk about today. Give you some thoughts on the NBA playoffs, as well as one of the more annoying off-the-court storylines that is currently going down that I warned you would become a thing when it comes to LeBron James. And now it's gotten even more annoying as his pain-in-the-ass son is about to come into the NBA. Did not have a good look for him this weekend. I'll give you some thoughts on that as we move forward here. Also, give you some thoughts on a announcement that was made last night that has baseball fans everywhere doing cartwheels, baseball fans everywhere celebrating, and it's a move that is very much long overdue, as well as many other things I will get to over the next hour here. But of course, we have to start with the conference finals in the NBA, where I can't believe we're in this position again. It was 1 year ago at this time where we were on the verge of two sweeps in the conference finals. Now, that ended up not happening. The Celtics put it in a little bit of extra effort, put in a little bit of extra heart and tenacity, and were able to make somewhat of a series against the Miami Heat, even forcing a Game 7 before getting blown out on their home court, whereas the Nuggets swept the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals last year. Well, we are on the verge of that happening again here, with last night the Boston Celtics sweeping the Indiana Pacers to end the Eastern Conference Finals, sending them to the NBA Finals for the 23rd time in franchise history, second time during the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown era. And probably the more surprising thing to me is that the Dallas Mavericks are on the verge of sweeping the Minnesota Timberwolves. I never for 1 second thought that the Indiana Pacers were going to defeat the Boston Celtics, were going to manage to win 4 games in a 7-game span against that team. Because for as much crap as we give the Celtics for them at times being a kind of soft team, where they've been a 500 team at home in the postseason over the last couple of years, where they have had an easy trip seemingly through the NBA playoffs, now 12-2 on their way to an NBA Finals that they're going to have to wait 9 days for. They were the best team in the league during this regular season. They may not have that one player on their team where you look at them and say they're going to finish in the top 20 all time as far as players when all is said and done. They may not have that one player where you look at them and say they're going to get a statue outside of TD Bank Arena when their career is over, because Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum may be future Hall of Famers, but I don't think anyone's going to be mistaking them for Larry Bird or Kevin McHale or Robert Parrish or Paul Pierce or any of the previous legends in that franchise. Not yet, mind you, because they haven't won a championship. They've had plenty of cracks at the can here. They've had plenty of opportunities, but have never gotten over that hurdle, have never made that leap into immortality. And now they have that chance. Many have brought up constantly how the Eastern Conference had a lot of problems this year. How the Eastern Conference, it seemed like it was the Boston Celtics and everybody else. And I mentioned last week how both of these teams, the Celtics and the Pacers, won the battle of nutrition here, with the Pacers getting through a beat-up Milwaukee Bucks team, not having Giannis Antetokounmpo in that first round, with them getting by a Knicks team that was constantly losing players throughout that series. And the Celtics were able to take advantage of the Miami Heat along the way en route to this playoffs. Were able to take advantage of the Cavaliers getting beaten up. But look at all of these teams. The Knicks, as good a story as they were without Julius Randle. Were not the same team defensively without OG Anunoby. The Milwaukee Bucks had more problems than we even realized before this season started. I mean, it feels like Drew Holiday was truly the straw that stirs the drink there, with how much things started to collapse, things started to fall apart around that franchise, especially when you look at the fact that they fire the coach in the middle of the season. Their defense took a serious plunge this year without him. And now they're on the verge of looking at a team that may break up at the end of this year or next year, because Dame Lillard doesn't seem happy there. Giannis, who knows what decision he might make. It all is going to depend on whether they keep that crazy brother of his around and what moves they make to improve that team. The Doc Rivers experiment never truly worked there. And you didn't have really that other team that was ready to step up and be that true competition to Boston. Be that team that pushed the Milwaukee Bucks. Be that team that took advantage of the Knicks injuries, because the Magic are very young. The Pacers are a very young team. The Pacers is the first time that they have been this deep in the postseason, and now they're going home seemingly shell-shocked after what was a fairy tale ride, because you look at it, they could have won 3 of these 4 games. They had the lead late in game 1 they started committing stupid turnover after stupid turnover. They had 21 turnovers in total. 8 came in the fourth quarter and overtime, including Tyrese Halliburton throwing the ball out of bounds with 28 seconds left. Andrew Nembhard throwing the ball out of bounds with 8 seconds remaining. And then Jaylen Brown making a remarkable 3-point shot with a hand in his face that not many players in this league are going to make from the baseline to tie this up and force overtime. And once it went to overtime, you just knew that was going to be not just the death nail for the Pacers in that game, but in that series. Because if they were going to steal one, if they were going to get one in Boston, game 1 was the one to do it. That was the one with Boston having time off, with Boston seemingly sleepwalking through this, and the Pacers coming off of an exciting 7-game series win over the Knicks. That was the time to steal one, especially coming back from several double-digit deficits throughout that game. But then you take into account losing Tyrese Halliburton in game 2, and then having leads in both games 3 and 4. I give Andrew Nembhard a lot of credit. He played with a lot of heart. He played with a lot of tenacity. But we've said this all year long when it comes to the Celtics. If they make their 3-point shots, which they seem drunk on them at times, they are going to be extremely difficult to deal with. Because if you look at Celtics Pacers, if you did a draft heading into that series, you'd start with Tatum, then go Brown, then probably Holiday, before you consider Halliburton. And then after that, you're selecting at least 2 more players on the Celtics, maybe even 3 if they had a healthy Kristaps Porzingis. And getting the sweep, that allows them to have more time for Kristaps Porzingis to rest up. That allows him more time to get healthy heading into the NBA Finals. As now it's going to be, at least 3 weeks since the last time he played. At least 3 weeks since the last time he's had to put legitimate pressure on his lower legs. And you're going to need him going into these finals, no matter which one of these teams you're playing. No matter if it's the likely matchup with the Dallas Mavericks, or it's a historic comeback, which I can't see happening, going up against the Minnesota Timberwolves. You're going to need the size that he brings. You're going to need the range that he brings, being a 7-footer that can shoot from beyond the arc, that will create matchup problems that neither one of those teams can combat, that neither one of those teams can look at and say, we really feel good about going up against Porzingis or this Celtics team. They provide so many options, so many things that they can do beyond just their 3-point shooting abilities. Like I said, I never expected the Pacers to win that series, but I thought that they would make it much more of a series than it turned out to be. And it didn't really feel like your traditional sweep because they had leads in at least 3 of these games in the fourth quarter, and they let them get away. But they're a young team, and maybe in the future they grow from that. Maybe in the future they have that true closer that can calm things down and get everybody on the right page. The more disappointing thing is what we're seeing in the Western Conference Finals. The more disappointing thing here is coming off of defeating last year's NBA champion Denver Nuggets, that we are on the verge of watching the Timberwolves go home. All due respect to Luka Doncic and especially Kyrie Irving, who surprisingly has been on his best behavior this year, despite how much of a pain in the ass he can be at times. They have had the clutch moments late in these games. They have been the team that has not looked flustered, even despite the fact that Luka Doncic was battling injuries in Game 2. Even despite the fact that Kyrie Irving has not had the greatest of shooting performances in the first couple of quarters of games. But when it really mattered the most, when it really came down to crunch time, he was there for his team. He was making the big shots. He was the one making the big plays and keeping his team alive, keeping his team's spirits up, allowing for them to make these comebacks. I'm very much disgusted in the Timberwolves. I'm very much disappointed in what I'm seeing from them, especially their big three, if we want to call it that. Rudy Gobert, the defensive player of the year, has looked anything but that. He has looked like a liability on the court at times here. It's seemingly 4 versus 5 when the Mavericks have the ball in their hand. He's just standing back there looking shell-shocked, looking clueless as to what he's supposed to do because of the range that the Mavericks can shoot from and the different ways that they can pick you apart. See, last series, you have to deal with the size and inside toughness that the Nuggets could bring to you. This series, you're watching the Mavericks pick and roll them to death. You're watching them at times when Luka is off the court. Kyrie Irving has been sizzling, getting double teams thrown at him nonstop, and hitting wide open guys for easy buckets. Gobert has done nothing to combat that. Gobert has done nothing to really state his presence in this series so far. Then you take Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards, who we've all made this comparison, or at least I've tried not to make this comparison, of calling him a young Michael Jordan coming into this series. And although he has tried not to make excuses, the last thing you want to hear him say after what was an off-shooting night in Game 1 is bringing up how tired he was, how he was feeling a bit of fatigue. I know you're 22 years old, you're young, this is the first time you've been this deep in the playoffs, and hopefully for your sake you'll grow from it. But everybody at this time of the year is feeling fatigued. Everybody this time of year, the energy level is running on about 15%. And to bring that up during any postgame just kind of comes off as excuses, just kind of comes off as, hey, we're trying to set up a safety net, set up a backstory here for if or when we eventually lose this series. But even for as bad as Gobert has looked defensively, even for as inconsistent as Anthony Edwards has been up until Game 3 when he finally stopped trying to be a perimeter shooter and was driving the paint, trying to be aggressive inside. The real guy that deserves a lot of criticism here, the real one that deserves a lot of egg on his face for his performance here, is Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns, who had the gall to say earlier in these playoffs, quote, "I'm the greatest big man shooter of all time. That's a fact. I don't gotta be the second version of someone. I'm already an original." Karl Anthony Towns has been lost this entire series. Greatest shooting big man of all time? How about 2 for 9 from behind the arc in Game 1, 1 for 5 behind the arc in Game 2, and then 0 for 8 in Game 3. Hell, he's been shooting so bad in this series that in the final 8 minutes and 40 seconds of Game 2, when his team was going back and forth with the Mavericks over the lead, his ass was glued to the bench. And you had the combination of Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid out there guarding the paint. And you would think that would piss him off enough to come back out there and have a big-time performance for Game 3, where you're tiptoeing on your season being on the line. He comes out there and lays an egg, going 0 for 8 from behind the arc, missing shot after shot, and being on the floor for when Minnesota pretty much choked this game away. You're watching them as the Mavericks go on this 14-3 run in the final 5 minutes of the game. And where's somebody to step up? You're watching Luka and Kyrie step up and make big shots in the big moments. But Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns are nowhere to be found. So it's disappointing to watch that after how clutch, how tough they looked against the Denver Nuggets in coming back in that series and seeing them fall apart like this. I thought it was a coin flip series going in. I thought that the Minnesota Timberwolves, their size was going to prevail. But as much as I dislike Kyrie Irving, for as much of a giant pain in the ass as he may be, I do have to give him and Luka Doncic a lot of credit. And I've been harsh on Luka, saying, when is the time? When is he going to win something big? Well, now's that opportunity. I personally hope that the Timberwolves make more of a series of this, win the next couple of games, and at least force a Game 6 back in Dallas. But now's the opportunity for Luka to finally win a championship. Because you look at that Western Conference, it's only going to get better in the years to come, not worse. The Nuggets are going to reload and be back next year. This T-Wolves team, their main stars are young, especially Anthony Edwards. They're not going anywhere. Who knows what's going to happen in the future with the likes of the Suns, Clippers, Lakers. We know OKC is not going anywhere. So now's the time for Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving to strike while the iron is hot. Back up all of this talk, all this nonsense that's been going on in the last couple of days that, they're the greatest offensive backcourt of all time. Can't make that claim, can't have that label until you win a championship. And these two teams, the Celtics and the Mavericks, their legacies are going to be forever cemented with this finals because no one remembers who finished in second place. No one gives out second place trophies. It's all about the winner. It's all about who got it done in the month of June. Who was the one last standing with the Larry O'Brien trophy hanging over their heads. All right, a lot left to get to over the course of this podcast. As I said, give you some thoughts on some of the nonsense that went down over the last couple of days with LeBron James, an unfortunate passing in the sports world yesterday that I'll talk about, reflect upon coming up. Some great news that went down in the sports world last night that I think fans everywhere are going to be celebrating and cherishing for a long time. And I'll try to mix in some baseball as well. So a lot to get to over the next about 40 minutes here. Glad you guys could tune in this week or listen to the podcast version. And like I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, help, put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
I don't like to be that guy who says, I told you so. That's a lie. I love being that guy that says I told you so. Drives some people crazy at times, but whatever. But I saw this coming from a mile away. I knew this was going to happen. The second that the Los Angeles Lakers lost in the first round to the Denver Nuggets, I told you all, get ready, people. Each and every single week, there's going to be something new when it comes to LeBron James. See, LeBron James is a lot like Alex Rodriguez. He doesn't have the off-the-court scandals like A-Rod did with steroids, but he seemingly can't help himself. He's very aloof at times. He tries to act like he's not, and tries to act like he's just this one with the world and has a grip on what's going on. But at times he loses touch with reality. Take, for example, last week or the week before, whenever it was, when he showed up at a Boston Celtics Cleveland Cavaliers playoff game. That wasn't by mistake. That wasn't by accident. You really thought that this guy was just happening to be in Cleveland because, it was Mother's Day weekend and just showed up for an NBA game, sitting courtside with a bottle of wine? No, that was a message being sent to the Los Angeles Lakers. And each week since the Lakers got eliminated from the postseason, there's been these little drips, little dabs, little moments where LeBron kind of peeks his head in there now and again, whether it has to do with the Lakers head coaching search, whether it has to do before that with Darvin Ham's future. And now you have the latest nonsense to come out, as Shams was reporting over the weekend on FanDuel TV show Run It Back. LeBron James has made it clear that this is the organization's decision when it comes to the Lakers head coaching search, saying, quote, "I'm told LeBron James is not involved in the Lakers head coaching search. James has made it clear this is the organization's decision. He's had no conversations with the Lakers about JJ Redick." Right, yeah. You've had no conversations with the guy that you now happen to do a podcast with. A guy that has made it known he would like to be a coach in this league at some point. A guy that, as far as breaking it down, X's and O's on television, is one of, if not the best that there is out there right now. At least as far as ESPN is concerned. I mean, come on. LeBron James has his hand on everything involving every organization he's ever been part of. The only time where he wasn't in complete control of the situation was when he was with the Miami Heat, because that was Dwayne Wade's team. And as we all know, Law and Order starts when it comes to the Miami Heat with Pat Riley. He has the first say, the final say, the only say. So everywhere, whether it be the first time with Cleveland, the last time with Cleveland, now with the Lakers, LeBron James always has some kind of input on what the organization is doing, whether it be with the head coaching search or what they're doing as far as changing up the roster. Remember, last year he was criticizing how the roster was constructed, or making those subtle comments on social media about it, where he was posting the hourglass and things like that leading up to the trade deadline. And that's when they completely turn the roster around. Got rid of everybody except for himself, Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves, and turned that entire roster that was a mess from the beginning with the Russell Westbrooks of the world and Patrick Beverleys. Got all of those guys out of there and were able to turn things around and get to the Western Conference Finals. So him trying to put this out there, the fact that they leaked it to someone like Shams, or if they would have leaked it to Woj, it's just another attempt by him and Rich Paul to play games. And now their latest ploy to try to control the narrative, try to put pressure on the Lakers, is when Rich Paul, whether it was by accident or it was a subtle slip of the tongue, during the alternate broadcast of Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals on TNT, said, quote, LeBron James is a free agent. That's the first time we've heard that. That's the first time that we've heard anyone bring up anything about LeBron's future, bring up anything about what direction LeBron could be heading in. And I would be very surprised if he were to turn down a $51 million player option. I've thought from the beginning a lot of it is going to depend on what happens with the future of Bronny. And I must say, I'm getting annoyed with this kid. I am getting annoyed with what I thought was a kid with a good head on his shoulders. What I thought was a kid that was coming into this league with a good mindset, a good workmanship, battling back from the heart problems that he had last summer that not only almost ended his basketball career, ending his basketball playing days, but almost ended his life. There was a time there where we thought Bronny James might die last summer. And what he's had to battle back from is in some ways truly inspirational. But then when you see these reports come out today that he has turned down all invites for private pre-draft workouts, except for two teams, except for the Lakers and the Phoenix Suns, he sounds like an entitled brat. He sounds like someone who's now living off of his father's legacy. Because in the past, we've seen guys turn down workouts. Remember, just a couple of years ago, DeAndre Ayton, when he was coming into the league, turned down all workouts from everybody other than the Phoenix Suns because he knew he was the best player in that draft. He knew in all likelihood he was going to be the first overall player taken. But who the hell is Bronny James to be making these kind of demands? Who the hell is Bronny James to be saying that, oh, I'm not going to work out for anybody but two teams? We're not talking about a guy that, like his father, is a physical freak. We're not talking about a guy that is gifted all world at 6'5", 6'6", has the speed of a gazelle, could block anybody's shot. No, the guy's barely 6'1". He has as slow a release as you're going to find. And he's a guy that only averaged 4 points during the college basketball season, playing for a losing team at USC. Averaged, 2 assists per game? And he's going to be trying to call his own shot. It's bad enough that Rich Paul over the weekend was saying that, oh, Bronny's not going to sign a two-way contract, which, please, they're out of their minds. These teams will look at them quickly and say, we're not going to draft you then. Because every scouting report you read about this kid says late second round to undraft in a good draft. And I mean a draft that had future potential superstars. He would never be even under consideration for getting drafted. He would never even be considered for a possible second round draft pick. The only reason we're talking about this kid right now is because he is the son of one of the greatest players of all time. And right now, he comes off as entitled, he comes off as a spoiled brat, and someone has got to get him a reality check, whether that is his father, whether that's Rich Paul. Hell, maybe someone should have a conversation with the two of them, because clearly they're feeding this kid all of the wrong information. Either that, or he's believing whatever hype he seems to think he has in all the wrong ways. Because as of right now, no one looks at Bronny James and thinks that he can just jump right into the NBA and be a successful player. I normally do not get very melancholy when a professional athlete passes away. Sometimes when it's a current player, but those are few and far between. We've seen some accidents over the years, whether it be like in my lifetime when Corey Lytle flew a plane into an apartment building. We've seen other such cases in all of these sports where players died too young. But I don't get really melancholy about those who played prior to my generation because I didn't see them play. They didn't really have an impact on my sports fandom. I mean, it was sad when Bill Russell passed away, but that was really the first of the legends, the all-time greats of the game in the NBA that passed away. But pretty much all of them, with the exception of Wilt Chamberlain and, of course, the late, great Kobe Bryant, were still with us up until Bill Russell's passing last year. Well, now we've unfortunately lost another legend, and this one really struck me. This one struck a chord here and kind of had me in one of those wow moments when I heard about the passing of Hall of Famer Bill Walton yesterday. And like I said, I am too young to remember Bill Walton as a player. Certainly didn't see him in college, where anyone who did will tell you, next to Kareem, he was the best player in college basketball history. He was nearly unstoppable offensively. He was one of the ultimate winners that you're ever going to find, as he went from his junior year of high school to his senior year of college without losing a game. Was a two-time national champion at UCLA under probably the greatest coach in not just college basketball, but maybe all of college sports history in John Wooden. Their team went 86-4 over his 3 seasons, including 2 30-0 seasons. He was a 3-time National Player of the Year, and in the championship game in 73 against Memphis, had one of the greatest performances you're ever going to see, as he scored 40 points on 21 of 22 shooting. Now, the unfortunate thing about him is, as great as he was in college, we didn't get to see the full antithesis of that in the pros, because he dealt with a lot of injuries. He dealt with foot injuries. He dealt with back problems that, if you look back on his career over a near decade's time after being the first overall pick in 74, he would only go on to play just over 460 games in the NBA. He was kind of limited after his time originally with the Portland Trailblazers to being a six man, and would turn out to be one of the greatest six men of all time. Some people to this day will still make the argument that the greatest team in NBA history was the 86 Celtics, with that big three of Bird, McHale, Parrish, and company. Well, you look at that team, Bill Walton was coming off the bench and was as great a passing big man as you're ever going to see. He played a beautiful style of basketball for a guy that was limited due to all of the injuries that he happened to be battling throughout his career. Now, my generation will mostly remember him as that quirky announcer on ESPN, that quirky broadcaster, whether it was when he was in studios during his time as an NBA analyst. He was in there with Stephen A. Smith, amongst others, before shifting to college basketball over the last 12 years. And his pairing with Dave Pask doing Pac-12 games late at night on Saturday nights, even if the game was a crappy game, even if the game was a snooze fest, you were tuning in just to hear what Bill Walton was talking about, what kind of stories that he was going to bring up somehow, some way. And I don't even know how you keep track of this, but this is a man that saw the Grateful Dead in concert over 1,000 times. He was also a guy that stood up for a lot of social issues, for a lot of humanitarian issues that nowadays, if he came along as a player, would probably be frowned upon by owners and general managers everywhere. But he also was someone that appreciated life, despite how limited his NBA career would turn out to be. He had an appreciation, a love for life, always smiling, always joyful, always jubilant. So not just the sports world, but life in general lost a great one yesterday with Bill Walton's passing. I had no idea that he was even battling cancer. I didn't know that he had been going through that fight in the last several years. Lived a fairly long life, living to 71, but his family's hurting today. All of us as sports fans, whether you saw him play back his college days, his pro days, or like me, you knew him as that quirky, crazy announcer on ESPN for NBA and college basketball. We all love Bill Walton, and we really lost a great one yesterday. So rest in peace to Basketball Hall of Famer and legend, Bill Walton. We all know how difficult this life can be. We all know how difficult times can be. Hell, we saw it in the last couple of years with the pandemic, with a lot of the things that were going on to impact our way of life, going on to impact the way we live our life, and some of the limitations that were placed on us. So no one would ever go out there and root for someone to lose their job. No one would ever go out there and be beating the drum unless you really had that awful coworker that made you feel like shit every single time you show up for work. I sometimes deal with that in my own case, but I digress. But I think I speak for baseball fans everywhere when I say halla frickin' luya when the news came out last night about MLB umpire Angel Hernandez retiring effective immediately and ending his 34-year-long career. Because this guy, it doesn't matter who you want to throw out there, whether it's an NFL referee, whether it's ex-NBA official Joey Crawford, whoever it may be, there was no one in the sports officiating landscape that was as bad at their job as Angel Hernandez. He was the absolute worst. He stuck his nose into every game somehow, some way, had one of the worst strike zones that you're ever going to see. And this is a guy that had the unmitigated gall to file a lawsuit against Major League Baseball claiming that they were being racist and discriminatory toward him for the fact that he was not getting big games such as the playoffs, that he was not getting World Series opportunities. I'm sorry, the last time this guy worked a World Series game was 2005. The last time this guy worked a league championship series was 2016. And in no way, shape, or form should he have been allowed near any of them, especially when he filed that lawsuit against the league in 2017. They decided to throw him a bone a little bit, try to calm things down by giving him a playoff assignment in 2018 in the opening round series between the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees. Well, during a game in that series, he had not just one, not two, but 3 calls overturned by replay in the first 4 innings of the game. And before that game, Joe Torre, out of the goodness of his heart, was considering giving him the assignment to work the World Series that year. But immediately after that, he said, no way, can't do it. This guy was protected by the umpires union for so long, it made them look like the biggest bunch of fools in the world. Because you're talking about a guy that should never have been even allowed near the baseball diamond. You're talking about a guy that, if we're doing this on a merit system rather than just, you gotta follow the rules of the union, you gotta respect the union, he would have been fired a long damn time ago. Like, come on, baseball umpires. I don't care how much you like someone as a person. He was bringing all of you down with you. There's a reason why fans were longing and craving for the potential of robot umpires. There's a reason why MLB is testing those out, and possibly in 2026 we're going to have the automated strike zone. He was a joke. He was an embarrassment. And you hope that at some point he takes the likes of C.B. Buckner, Laz Diaz, and so many others of these crap guys, Phil Cuzzy, so many of them that are still left in this game that are bringing down the good umpires. As my buddy Justin puts in the comments here, there's never been so much coverage about an umpire retiring. And that's a testament to how bad he was. And I gotta give you a lot of credit there, Justin, because that speaks true. There's rarely things in the sports world that fans will universally agree to, but he was that terrible at his job, and this was long overdue. Not a piece of sad news that came out of baseball over this weekend. The injury to Ronald Acuna Jr. as he tore his left ACL on a non-contact running the base paths situation on Sunday. He kind of misstepped as it looked like he was going to take off and steal third and crumbled right to the ground, taking him out for the rest of this season. Now, not all is lost if you're an Atlanta Braves fan. Because, yes, it does suck to see your star, one of the faces of your franchise, go down with some kind of an injury that knocks out his season. But this did happen once before. It happened to his right ACL. And remember, the year that happened, the Atlanta Braves would go on to win the World Series. The problem is, you have a juggernaut in your own division right now, as the Philadelphia Phillies have been the hottest team in the sport for over a month now. After a 7-7 start, the Phillies are 31-10. They have boat raced by you in that National League East, have seized control of the division. Bryce Harper is off to a historic pace on his season, looking locked in at the plate and playing excellent defense at first base, showing that you can go from the outfield to the infield. So they're going to be a very difficult team to beat, especially when you've lost Spencer Strider to the dreaded Tommy John surgery for the year, and take into account that Matt Olson has not exactly gotten off to the greatest of starts in the world. He had 2 home runs in the month of April, was batting about 200, but now he's batting 260 in this last month, has 5 home runs, 3 in the last week, so you hope he starts get going. But the Phillies are going to be a tough team to catch up with. I know we're only at the third of the season mark. Everybody's played about 52 to 54 games at this point. And maybe it's too soon to be looking at the wild card standings. But the Braves have built themselves a sizable lead at the moment for the top spot in the wild card standings. Too early to completely give up on the division. Maybe at some point the Phillies start to cool off. Maybe this trip to London they're about to go on with the Mets is going to cool them off. But the Braves, that was a severely difficult blow, losing one of their stars over this weekend. But they're not going to have much competition when it comes to holding off those wild card spots, because you look at the bottom half of that National League. Pittsburgh was kind of a cute story there for a hot minute, but they've fallen under 500. The Nationals are continuing to rebuild. The Reds look like a seriously disappointing team. I thought they were going to take the next step after a hot summer last year. The Rockies and Marlins have flat out given up, and the Mets are truly a disaster. The Mets are an unwatchable, unmitigated mess. In fact, the Mets right now have begun a doubleheader with the Los Angeles Dodgers after getting rained out yesterday. They do have a 2-1 lead in the 8th inning, but that's now been cut in half as their bullpen is starting to crap the bed, and they really don't have much reliability in that bullpen these days, as Diaz is a mess. Reed Garrett has started to come back down to earth in the last 10 days. You're still without Kodai Senga, and that offense as a collective unit looks like a total mess. I mean, Harrison Bader cannot be your best hitter with runners in scoring position and think you're going to be competitive. But hey, everyone, there is a bright side. There is a sunny side, and that's on the Bronx. How about our Yankees? How about our Yankees? After a rough start, admit it, Yankee fans. Admit it, you were nervous about Aaron Judge. Admit it. You all thought that, oh my God, Judge coming off the toe, it's still a problem. He looks horrible in April. He's been the best player in baseball in the month of May. You can't stop that man. I warned you all. I told you all, don't give up on the Judge. I told the rest of baseball, don't let that man get locked in. Because remember, he did not play the last 3 weeks of spring training. See, the month of April was kind of his tune-up. The month of April was kind of his time to get firing on all cylinders. And now, ever since that ridiculous ejection, the gall of a Major League Baseball umpire to eject the captain of the New York Yankees on May 4th, Star Wars Day, with your boy M3 in the building. And since then, he's been firing on all cylinders. First 27 games of the season, he was batting $178, an on-base percentage of barely over 300, and only 4 home runs. In the last 28 games, he's batting over 380, has an on-base of over 500, a slugging over 900, 13 home runs, 12 doubles. The team is an excellent 20-8, has the best record in the American League as we sit here today. So, Met fans, we're here for you. If you want to, jump off the Uncle Stevie Cohen bandwagon right now, come crawling over to the Bronx. We'll provide you that life raft, and just as you're about to latch on, as you're about to climb aboard, we're going to pull the life raft from under you, because we do not accept any Johnny-come-latelys. Let's go, Yankees.
I'll be back.
Only a few more minutes to play with here, but I got a couple more things on my mind. And I am not in love with the piece of news that came out in college athletics in the last couple of days. I have always been in support of these athletes, especially those in football and basketball, the real money makers in college sports, getting paid for their likeness and image. I have said that the schools should not be the only ones making money off of them, whether it be t-shirts, jersey sales, posters, whatever. If they want to make extra money off the field via commercials, whether it be endorsements, advertisements, being on billboards, being on ads on websites, whatever it may be, fine. All power to you. You should be able to make money off your own name, likeness, and image, not a higher power that has control of your rights. But I have never been one to say that college athletics should have a salary. I have never been one to say that these players should be on payroll for their schools. Well, it looks like we are about to hit that. It looks like that is about to happen as the NCAA and the Power 5 conferences have agreed to allow schools to directly pay players for the first time in the 100 years of college sports. They are moving toward a multi-billion-dollar agreement to settle 3 pending federal antitrust cases. The NCAA will pay more than $2.7 billion in damages over 10 years to past and current athletes. All Division I athletes dating back to 2016 are eligible to receive a share as part of this class action settlement. And in exchange, the athletes cannot sue the NCAA for any other potential antitrust violations and must drop their complaints in the following 3 opening cases: House versus NCAA, Hubbard versus NCAA, and Carter versus NCAA. And all this sounds like to me is now these players are officially employees of the school. If these schools can now pay them beyond just the 2.7 in damage, they're going to allow revenue sharing starting in 2026 of roughly $20 million per year per school for its athletes. How are you going to divide this up? Because as we know, there is a rule in college athletics, Title IX, where whatever you do for the football teams and basketball teams, you got to do for the women's basketball team, you got to do for the baseball team, the softball team, lacrosse, field hockey. You got to do it for everybody. You can't just do it for one part of your athletic program. And are you going to see these schools really willing to pay the same amount to, say, their starting quarterback as they would the backup center on the women's basketball team? I'm not trying to be sexist here, because as you all know, I've been a big supporter for the rise that we've seen in women's college basketball and in the WNBA. But are you going to be really paying the same amount for a star athlete compared to a bench warmer in one of these programs? To me, this is just opening up another can of worms. This is something more so that these coaches should have been worried about. Not the NIL deals or the transfer portal, but you get one of these kids that's unhappy about, how much he's making at his school. He might see grass greener on the other side and jump to another program because, they can pay him more for being a student athlete. And let's throw that term out the window now. They no longer exists. These kids are now officially employees of these programs. With the fact that you can now pay them for their on-the-field play, that, like I said, I am supportive of them getting paid for their name, likeness, image, but this is a can of worms that I did not think that they needed to open. This is a path that I thought should have never been open, and I think it's going to create a lot more problems for the NCAA than it is going to help. One of the things that makes me sad about the end of each NBA season is it means the end for probably the greatest program in all of sports television. Probably the greatest program in all of any form of media. That being Inside the NBA on TNT. With Ernie Johnson, Kenny the Jet Smith, and Hall of Famers Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal. Because even when we have the shittiest of games in the world, the shittiest of doubleheaders, people tune in to watch what they say during the pregame show, what they'll say during halftime, what they'll say during the postgame show. Even if it was a crappy second game, you'll get some kind of ridiculous rant from Barkley, Kenny Smith. Ernie Johnson will be trying to do the highlights, be trying to stick with what just went on in the game that night. And meanwhile, these guys are off there talking about the nasty concessions at Phoenix Sun Arena or how fat the women are in San Antonio, Texas. Crazy stuff like that. Whatever is floating through Charles Barkley's head at that given time and moment. Well, unfortunately, it looks like we're coming to the end, a permanent end for Inside the NBA, because a deal was agreed to last week as far as TNT losing coverage of Inside the NBA, losing the games airing on there as the NBA formalized deals with ESPN, NBC, and Amazon, where NBC will air Basketball Night in America on Sundays after the NFL season. Amazon will have selective games during the year, and they increase the package with ESPN, and that means no more Inside the NBA. That means no more Arnie, Chuck, Shaq, and Kenny, because Arnie has already said he's not leaving Turner Sports. He's worked there since the 80s. And the other three have been saying that they will not do the show without Arnie Johnson. And I know Adam Silver has tried to calm down the flames in recent days, come out and said that he still believes some way, somehow, some shape and form that we're going to have these guys part of the basketball coverage. Well, you better, because people love this show. This was must-see television. Not just anytime, a player did something stupid on the court that would lead to a suspension, you get their opinion, like the crap Draymond Green did earlier this year. Or some of the ridiculous nonsense, dirty plays that we've seen from certain players over the years. when there's real life things going on, or someone doing something stupid off the court like Ja Morant, they are not afraid to talk about anything that is going on in this crazy, wacky, wild thing that we call life. So I hope that there's some kind of way that they can fix this, whether it be they move Inside the NBA to being a show on NBA TV at least twice a week, because that is still under the Turner brand, under the Turner flagship. But man, it's going to be extremely sad. It's going to feel like something is missing from my soul as a sports fan if we go into a season not knowing that you're going to have this foursome together to break down the game, to do these pre and post game shows, doing crazy things in the beginning of the season like who he played for, doing things during the playoffs like gone fishing. I love that group together, and it's going to be really sad for me as a sports fan knowing that next year, the 2024-2025 season is going to be the finale of Inside the NBA, because they are as much a part of basketball tradition and history and broadcast history as anybody else, and it's just not going to feel the same without them. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Tuesday, May 28th, 2024. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. If you got one life, people, might as well live it up. And I'll talk to you guys again next Monday afternoon. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, and I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.